something of you expected today, so there'll be more than one page on your Zoom screen, which is sometimes difficult to manage, but we're going to do it anyway. So feel free to, shift your page as it becomes, there we go, we've now hit our full page. All right. So here's what I'm going to do to get us started. Hi, I'm Pam Barkley from Moving Traditions. And as people come on, just to get you folks started, since you're already here, I'm just going to share my screen for a second. And like I said, because we're going to be 40-something people, we would have loved to do this out loud, but that would take up the whole time we have with you. And so instead, we're going to ask you in the chat to put your name, the organization, and where you're located, and then what is something creative, meaningful, significant, I don't know, something like that, that you have seen a family do at a B-Mitzvah since the pandemic began. Whether this is on Zoom, whether this is in a live stream, whether this is in their house, whatever that means to you, to put that in the chat so we can sort of see what other folks have been doing across the country, because just so you know, there are clergy people around the country coming to this. So put that all in, and we're gonna speed read as you do that. Oh, a Z-Mitzvah. Instead of a B-Mitzvah, a Z-Mitzvah. See that one, Daniel? So I don't even know how many people we're at, but however many there are, I think I'm going to get us started. So as you come on, if you're just joining us, if you can follow the instructions on your screen and put in your name, your organization, and something, anything, big, small, whatever, meaningful that you've seen somebody do as part of their B-Mitzvah, B'nai Mitzvah, Z-Mitzvah, see, I've learned something new, that you have seen them do since this pandemic began, so that we can share a little bit of that. Just by way of introductions, I am Pam Barkley. I am the Director of Strategic Implementation at Moving Traditions. I run all of the trainings, and I also run the B'nai Mitzvah program itself. I am joined here by my colleague, Rabbi Daniel Brenner, who you got the email from initially welcoming you to this. And Sarah Fox is with us as well for the beginning of the meeting, just to make sure everything is going okay. And she will be here for part of the meeting as well. As these answers come in, I and/or Daniel, just sort of curious about a few of the things that you have written in here. So if you are able to unmute and tell us a little more, I would think it would be great if some of us could hear a little bit more about what it is you wrote in this like 3-line version of something. So I see more than one person talked about having a Torah in more than one place. The first one I see is Rabbi Michael Mishkin, that you brought a Torah to the house of the Bat Mitzvah and did the Dor Vador ceremony of grandparents passing the Torah to parents. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that worked from a COVID point of view?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. Looking forward to hearing what you have to present. This family wanted to be in the sanctuary. We really considered just having the bat mitzvah, her sister, and the parents in the sanctuary, but we just felt that that was not going to work. It wasn't the safe thing to do. So we dropped a Torah off at their house, and it was very moving for them, and they felt great about that. So when we got to the Torah service, the cantor and I were zooming in from another location, and we got to the Torah service. They did the entire Torah service in their living room. We had to explain to them how to do it. So they were able to do the door-by-door ceremony of, the grandparents took the Torah and passed it to the parents, who then passed it to the bat mitzvah. And she just read one aliyah. She read the maftir aliyah, but when it got to the maftir, she was able to say the blessing before the Torah reading and read out of a Torah scroll. So that was, then also, all the family were able to do Hag Ben Galila. They, the dad lifted the Torah, the little sister helped wrap the Torah. They were able to kind of bring the whole family into it. So it really made it, it was, it would have been nice anyway, and it just brought it to another level.
Very cool. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that, you can either unmute or throw the question in the chat. That's just an interesting thing. I haven't heard a lot of that, but I think that's awesome. Just reading through now as more of them are coming in. Oh, well, that's interesting. Cantor Margot, your Zoom guest took selfies with the bat mitzvah screen and sent them to the family as a photo album.
Yes, they did. That's my understanding. That's one of the many things that went out in the invitation, that, if they should turn around, take a selfie with the screen so that the bar mitzvah child was on the screen. And it was as if they were at a party or at an event, and they could take a selfie with the guest of honor. And then they sent them to the B'nai Mitzvah family, and I'm guessing an album or something was created in that way. I didn't see the final product.
Very cool, but a way of dealing with the photography issue, right? Because we don't get to take the pictures that we would want to take at a bat mitzvah ceremony when everyone is in their own.
And a way for the bar mitzvah child who was alone in our sanctuary to know that their friends were really watching. They were really there, and get that sense, right? Because they don't have the feeling that I have when I lead services. I look up at our little blue light on our camera that says that I'm projecting out to the world, and I get it. Our kids don't get it.
Got it. Daniel, have you been reading any that you want to call out?
They're all really fascinating.
It's just interesting.
I'm particularly interested. I'm always interested in the work of Rabbi Goldie Milgram, who happens to be on this webinar with us, and was one of the first people that I started to read when I started to think about what is B'nai Mitzvah education about, because she has been a pioneer for a number of decades. So Goldie, do you want to say a little bit about the creative ritual that you did with the family? Because I think it's pretty wonderful.
Well, the one I wrote about is where the youth is a big environmentalist and is their family. And so they wrote, years ago for Dor Derech, I had suggested that there be new haftarot created because they were all written by men. So women started writing new haftarot, which you may remember, Daniel. And so this youth took that idea to ask the family to create, each person participating in the Zoom B-Mitzvah had to write a verse about an environmental organization's cause that they cared about. And then they did it, the student coached them in how to put their verse to Haftorah. Even though I ask the students to use all of their talents, and I don't make students chant if that's not their talent. They have other talents that will support Jewish life. And then they took It's a Wonderful World and they made it, we co-create this wonderful world. To that melody, to the It's a Wonderful World melody, was the refrain between each of the verses.
Contemporary prophecy.
Yeah, and they all made donations, of course, and showed their certificates for in honor of the student. They had made donations to the cause they picked.
Nice.
Well,
thanks, Daniel. That was very sweet. Thank you. I'm very excited about what you're doing. I can't wait to just savor and sheb nachas.
Awesome.
So if you're just joining, because I heard some more doorbells, if you're just joining us, if you can put into the chat your name, your organization, where it's located, and if one thing that you've seen that is interesting, meaningful something since the pandemic that a family has done at a B-Mitzvah ceremony of some sort, or a Zoom mitzvah. Got it. Okay, I always meant that as Zoom mitzvah. That's not right. And so, if you can share that, just because we're all sort of sharing some of the things that we've seen done. If you're just arriving, you can add that into the chat. So clearly there are lots of different, the moment we're in is interesting. The pandemic hit and we all had to sort of scramble and figure out what to do and how to make it work, right? And there's a lot of creativity that came out of that, right? You all are living proof of that. The chat is living proof of that. And Moving Traditions also had to pivot pretty quickly with our existing B'nai Mitzvah program that was run by about 65 congregations across the country this past year, because our material was not meant to be used in an online environment. It was meant to be used at family education and Hebrew school classes live in person. So obviously that world is changing, and we are changing with it. And so we are here to talk to you a little bit about what we have done to change, because we know that that will likely be in sync with some of the things that you have done to change, and we can all learn from each other about what this will look like moving forward to run family education for B'nai Mitzvah families from now until whenever we need to do them, not in person or even in person. And none of us know when that is. If I had a magic 8 ball, I would gladly tell you all, but since I don't, we're just gonna have to roll with it together and think creatively together. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to one piece of our actual B'nai Mitzvah program in a different kind of way, doing a piece of the curriculum we actually do, which is we're going to get into our 12 and 13-year-old self brains for just a sec. So if you look in the chat, I have, if I hit go, I have put in a Padlet link. If you've never been on Padlet, don't worry, I can walk you through it. If you've been on Padlet, fantastic. Click away, and it'll take you outside of Zoom, totally fine, we will bring you back. And look at that Padlet, and it says, what were you like as a 12 or 13-year-old? And there are a whole bunch of pictures here. And I'm gonna ask each of you to look through the pictures and find the one that you think resonates most with you. What represents your experience as a preteen or teen the best of these pictures, and say a little about why. You can also like some of the other ones, that's totally fine, but definitely write on at least one. You can write on more than one if you have time. Everyone finding the Padlet okay? Cool. And remember, it's fine if someone interprets a picture in one way and you're interpreting it in another.
Your leggings.
So I see a bunch of comments popping up. If you've written your comment, you should feel free to look around and see what other people are saying as well. You will note that most of you are coming in as anonymous, unless you already have a Padlet, in which case you're not going to come in as anonymous. You can put your names or not. It doesn't matter to me at all. I don't know that I look that cool, but I was definitely more focused on school. I like that, Joel. So as you all keep posting, I'm just going to sort of note the interesting different interpretations of pictures, as I mentioned before, which would happen if you did this with your families and your kids or your parents as well. If you look at the picture of the girl with the book over her cover, it's on the second row of them. Someone said, yes, that's me, I was an avid reader. And someone else said, lots of anti-Semitism. And so I felt frustrated. So one person sees the picture as like a reader and one, or close to it, and one is seeing it as a frustration, right? So the joy of pictures is that they are open to our interpretation. And that's part of why we use tools like this to help our teens in particular, but parents as well, to feel safe in exploring whatever it is they were like at 12 or 13, right? There's more than one way to picture any of these, right? The same thing with the picture in the very top row with the girl with the pencil in her mouth. So one person, this person has a name, Abby, you wrote, I was into doing well in school, and someone wrote, I was isolated. Looked at that same picture and said, I was isolated. Another one said, I loved studying and learning. So as you all take a look around what people are writing, is there anything popping up for you? You can feel free to unmute and make a comment, or you can put a comment in the chat, whichever way you want to do that. Because there's a lot to read here. You should all note that we've done this particular Padlet with different groups of people. We've never had as many people comment on the one with the people with all the talitot until this group. I shouldn't be surprised that a clergy webinar would end up with a lot of people who identified with being the shul kid in some sort of way. I guess that's not a big surprise, but kind of funny because we have done this, and that one usually doesn't get a whole lot of comments. But I suppose in this group, that's the exception. So you could endlessly look through this Padlet, and you will have access to it. So feel free to continuously look at this for at some point, just to understand what it is we did. But I'm going to ask you to come back to your Zoom screen so we can move on. This is just an intro, because part of the idea of our B'nai Mitzvah program at Moving Traditions is that we want everyone to tap into their 12 and 13-year-old selves, because that's where we will do our best work with the 12 and 13-year-olds in front of us, and with the parents of the 12 and 13-year-olds in front of us. If we understand what that experience is like, even in a small way, just as a snapshot, right? Just a picture. So this is one of the things that we bring to bear when we're running our actual program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Daniel.
Great. So I want to just give some background into some of the thinking that went into our initial development of the B'nai Mitzvah program, and also just some of the other thinking that has informed our work with adolescents over the last decade. I think that if you had any courses in rabbinical or cantorial school that dealt with adolescents, I remember we had one day in one life cycle class that we did this. I know some other people got to study with Betsy Stone at HUC, and she offered more of a course on teenagers and adolescents. But for most rabbis and cantors I've talked to, it was something that we talked about for maybe an hour and a half at one point. And maybe H. Stanley Hall's classic work, Adolescence, was referenced, and maybe people talked about adolescents and their need to be independent of parents. But it really wasn't a fully fleshed out, I would say, session. And the other thing that's happened is there have been profound changes in adolescence, particularly in the last decade. So I want to talk about like three important developmental psychology theories and psychologists really who have put these ideas out into the world, because I think that they are very much informing how we design the educational program for families, and how we think about the changing nature of the parent and preteen relationship. So the first is really the work of a psychologist named Brad Sachs, who is in the Baltimore area. And his idea is, I think, a very revolutionary one. And for those of us who work in this clergy space and deal with mourning, it is one which is quite obvious, even though before I heard him say it, it did not occur to me. And Sachs's basic theory is that a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah or B-Mitzvah child is going through a period of grief and mourning about the loss of childhood. And all of the things that we associate with the hormones or the changes, like we have these parental theories about what's going on with a child, they're actually part of what is a natural grieving and mourning process. And part of that process is silly. You can't order off a kid's menu in a restaurant, and you can't go in the playground anymore, and you can't go on certain rides at an amusement park. But part of that grieving childhood is really painful. You get less attention and cuddles and love from adults that might have given you those things, and they might have been welcome. You don't get stories read to you for bedtime anymore. You have to take responsibility for maybe your personal health, or take responsibility for someone in your family, and that is a burden on you. And all the other things that you can imagine. So one of the things that Sachs orients us to in anybody working with adolescents is thinking about what are the mourning and grieving rituals that help an adolescent move forward. And as we started to think about the B'nai Mitzvah space, one of the most, I would say, widely accepted Jewish rituals of B'nai Mitzvahs is creating a slideshow montage now on video of your childhood and looking back for the first time at your childhood. And this is an incredibly emotionally charged moment. And I see this not only before this pandemic hit, but now that the pandemic hit, people are putting more time into the slideshow, and everybody's watching it. It used to be a thing that people would like, oh, let's step outside, the slideshow's starting, and I know it's going to be 25 minutes long. But now people are, paying attention. And I think that we haven't really named this as a Jewish ritual, but it really is deeply connected to this transition from childhood to teen life. And in the work that we initially started with the B'nai Mitzvah, the framing that we had is that we wanted to change this impression that B'nai Mitzvah is about becoming an adult, and we wanted to get it into people's heads that it's about becoming a teen. And there's a profound difference when we start talking about B'nai Mitzvah as becoming a teen. And then we can turn to the other question that I think is really connected to B'nai Mitzvah. What does it mean to parent a teen? And how is parenting a teen different than parenting a child? So the other person another developmental psychologist that has done a lot of great work in the last decade has been Ray Simpson, who was at Harvard and is now at MIT. And one of the things that Simpson studied is she looked at this question, how is it that teenagers and parents are such close friends now? What has happened in the nature of parenting? And so she traced a number of things. First of all, people are having fewer children. People are spending more of their free time with their children. People are living more isolated from community, so their immediate nuclear family becomes more important. And so she started to trace how adolescence has changed because of the nature of parents wanting to be friends with their teenagers. And one of the things that came out of Simpson's work was not only a new list that has to do with the task of adolescence, but also new skills for parents to start to think about how do you parent a teen differently than parenting a child. And that really, in the last decade, especially as, you've probably all heard the derogatory term helicopter parent, Simpson really started to say, well, parenting is not an all or nothing thing. It's not like either you're a helicopter or you're gone. Parenting is about negotiating the spaces. And she started to craft really a beautiful set of of learnings for anybody working with parents and preteens to start thinking about. And the third adolescent psychologist, who I think is really important for all of us to think about here, is somebody who wrote mainly in the 1980s, but whose work is still really important. And that is the feminist psychologist Sandra Bem, who mostly spent her career teaching at Stanford, who basically said a preteen and a teen looks towards peers of their same gender identity to ask questions: how should I walk? How should I dress? How should I talk? How should I act? What choices should I make? And for Bem was one of the early pioneers who really talked about gender schema and breaking down gender codes. But I think her theory about gender is even more amplified in a world where there are more than two options for gender. Because what we are seeing now with many 12-year-olds is that they're looking at the multiple options of gender expression and thinking, am I like the other 12-year-olds who choose to say, I am a this or a that in terms of my gender identity? So everybody is going through this, even as we are breaking away, and I think in a wonderful way, from the rigid binary of gender. We're also having to deal again with 12 and 13-year-olds saying, who am I? Where do I fit in? But it's now a different map to fit into. So those are three theories that I think have been in the back of our minds as we start to think, well, what does Jewish education need to speak to? It needs to speak to those changes in adolescents' lives. It needs to speak to the moment of grief. It needs to speak to the relationship to the parents and how that has changed and how that needs to change. And it needs to speak to some of these more personal questions about gender identity. So I want to quickly just jump through some of the next pieces here, because I wanted to spend a little bit more time on theoretical, because that's important. But so that's core to our thinking, and what we've done. That's our mission for people who do not know that. What we've done is we've worked to build on what is the social emotional learning theory model of personal growth. So we think about every teenager, and every teenager is dealing with the 5 quadrants in the circle of social emotional learning. And what we have done is we've designed curricula that speak to all 5 of these quadrants. All 5 of these 5 quadrants makes no sense. That makes absolutely no sense. I can't believe I'm even saying 5 quadrants. That's like, do I know English? Okay, 5 sections of this wheel. And we have designed every one of our programs to fit into these 5 sections. So the idea is that we as educators help the personal growth of the teenagers that we are working with. Right now, we have a number of wonderful programs that we are offering for preteens and teens. And I want to just go through those really quickly. The one we're going to be focusing on today is the B-Mitzvah program. And we're going to talk not only about what we've learned in the last few years as we've gone from 10 partners to 20 partners to 45 partners to 65 partners. But we'll talk a little bit more about what we've developed for parents and preteens as we've adapted it to the online environment. And then most people here know about our original program, Rosh Chodesh, and how then we added Shevet and Selem to complement Rosh Chodesh. So all those programs now start in the 8th grade and go through 12th grade. And we also added a feminist leadership program called Kol Koledim. So I want to go back to B'nai Mitzvah for a second, because that's really where we want to focus some of our conversation today. And for those of you who have looked at the primary sources or have ever been asked the question, what is the source of B'nai Mitzvah in Judaism? I think it's important to say it's very complicated where the ritual came from and how it developed. Some of us, our go-to story is the story, which is from a midrash from the lives of Yaakov and Esav. When they were 13, one of them was like a rose bush and one of them was like a myrtle. That was one of the midrashim that explains that at 13, a child makes a decision what path that they want to follow. So that's why the age 13 is so important. And then, of course, we know that the ceremony itself didn't really begin until the 14th century. And it was at that time, it was a ceremony that only took place between fathers and sons, in which fathers basically said, I'm not paying your bills anymore. And we have a beautiful blessing, which, we have now adapted, the Shepetarani me ones zeh blessing that we have adapted from that I'm not paying your bills anymore moment. But there are not that many great resources to turn to that have to do with these becoming a teenager, except for one. And that is one that I think is really interesting to look at. So in a minute, we're going to look at that. But first, Pam is sharing here the task of adolescence, which I think is a great slide that's based off of Simpson's work. Really helps sharpen the focus on thinking about, where do we pull the educational content for the program. And the next slide is sharing a little bit about sort of the overview. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to create really authentic conversations between parents and preteens, and to have the community be a place where those conversations happen, and the community be a place that supports both the preteens and the parents. And one of the things that we are trying to do as we're transitioning everything online is make sure that even in the Zoom environment, a breakout room for parents can happen, a breakout room for preteens can happen, then they can come back together. All the things that we've been doing so successfully in person, now trying to retain those things. So the one thing that I would like to do is I'd like to get into at least one of the exercises that we do in that uses Jewish text, that uses, I think, my absolute favorite source text for B-Mitzvah, to look at adolescent development in a new way. So this is a text from Yehuda ben Tema, and this is in the Mishnah, or Pirkei Avot. It says, 5 years is the age for the study of scripture, 10 is the age for the study of Mishnah, 13 is the age for observing the mitzvot, and this is the source of B'nai Mitzvah in the Mishnah. 15 is the age for the study of Talmud. 18 is the age for the wedding canopy. 20 is the age for pursuit. 30 for full strength. 40 for understanding. 50 for giving counsel. 60, the age of maturity. 70, the age for a gray head. 80 for super added strength. 90, the age for bending stature. 100 is the age at which one is as if dead, passed away, and ceased from the world. And whenever I read this, I tell everybody that my grandmother at age 100 whooped my tuchus in Scrabble. So this is false. That last one, definitely false. But this framework and the ages in this particular Mishnah to me are really fascinating. That they focus so much time on the teen years, especially calling out 13, 15, and 18. That to me is fascinating in and of itself. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have us all collectively think a little bit about what these ages are today. So this is another one of the examples of one of the things that we use in the family education that has been really incredibly effective and really helping them think about adolescent development. But I want to take a look at some of these ages. So we're going to do a whiteboard. And if you haven't done a whiteboard before, Pam, do we have time to do the whiteboard? Yes?
Yes, I was going to do us into breakout rooms, but we can do whiteboard instead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just because breakout rooms are so fun, but we can do it on a whiteboard. We've done it both ways.
You're right.
Like, whichever way you want, Daniel. I'm sitting on go either way. Want a whiteboard? Let's whiteboard it. You got it. Whiteboard.
how about, you know what? Let's give people an opportunity to do smaller breakouts, because I think that would be
All right.
better. I know there's some people here that, you know, I always like meeting new people. Breakout rooms that are help us do that a little bit.
So here's what's going to happen. In like 30 seconds, I'm going to hit go. It's random. I'm randomly making breakout rooms. So if you are someone who's not currently on video, this might be your moment to pop back in so that you can see the smaller group that you're with, if that's possible, given what's going on in your particular environment. So please take this opportunity to unblock yourself. As well, in the chat, what I'm putting in the chat, which I'll literally hit send on right now, is 5 is the age for, 10 is the age for, right? You all see that. Your job as a small group is to come up with an answer to as many of those things as possible. Okay? A modern day version. This was Yehuda Ben Tama's version. What is your version, your community's version, your idea about what each of these is the age for? Be as specific as possible. Go right ahead. We love specific answers. And when we come back, we're only going to be in the breakout rooms for like 6 or 7 minutes. So we're going to do this really snap fast so that we can come back together and share. All right? So I'm going to go create rooms and you're going to all magically be transported. See you in a few. Scott and Larissa, are you here? Scott and Larissa.
Cut off mid-sentence.
That's okay.
Sorry, welcome back.
Good morning.
So everyone is still coming back. I can see that. We're not going to have time, obviously, to do a full round debrief, but Dalen, you want to just do a quick sort of popcorn out?
I mean, there were such wonderful things in our group.
Us too.
We spent more time on the first 3 ages, but I have to say, the things that really stuck in my mind is that at 5 years old, you learn how to lose a game. At 10 years old, you start to help younger children in whatever things that are happening. At 13, legally, you can be left alone in your house.
Yeah.
And 15, the thing we talked about was starting high school and like what that means. Was a number of interesting things. The other thing that I guess 2 other ideas that we talked about were how the tethering of children is changing childhood. Like if I can track you on my smartphone at all times, what does that mean? And the other thing we talked about are kids that, for one reason or another, do not go along these kinds of trajectories. And there are many children who, have a totally different trajectory that they're going to be on. And I think it's just important to note that whenever we're looking at a text that has expectations about ages.
Yeah. Anyone have an answer from another group for an age beyond that? Let's do 18. What was 18 for? Who's got an 18? Go.
I'll share. We sort of identified more in the way of like, what's the lens through which life is happening. So 18 was independence seeking or independence. All things separate an 18-year-old potentially from family, whether it's a choice to go to school or a choice to get your own apartment or whatever it is, but it's like an independence shifting position.
Yeah. Anyone have a 20? One for 20 they want to share? Go ahead.
I have another 18.
Oh, go ahead.
I have another 18. It's kind of the age of the transition to college. So what we try to do is prepare our students to, and all this was through the prism of Jewish life, as in the Pirkei Avot, that we're preparing them to join a Hillel, to join some kind of some kind of a Jewish organization within the campus life, because there are so many directions you can be pulled on campus as you are facing independence that you've never had before. And yet we want to do something to instill Jewish values, Jewish community within the broader life of campus life.
Yes, absolutely. So as you can hear, there's different ideas about what all these ages are for. This is a really good example, sort of pulling back, of how we would use a Jewish text and how we use our Jewish text in order to help our parents and their preteens have modern day conversations. Picture this for a minute, your parents and your kids in your communities and your congregations having this conversation together. What that might be like, and the differences of opinion that might emerge between the parents and the preteens about what all these ages are for and what the expectations are, and what preteens might learn about their parents who might say, I don't know what 40 is the age for, or I don't know what 50 is the age for, right? They're going to be learning about each other in this different kind of way, but through the lens of this Jewish text. So this is just a small sample to give you an idea of something. This is straight from one of our sessions called Today I Am an Adult, because this is one of the things we say to kids, right? Today you are a man or a woman or an adult, but they're not. They're really a teen, right? So it's today I am an adult. What does it mean to become a teen? And that is really the metaphor for our Hobonei Mitzvah program. So I am now in charge of giving you some of the sort of, I'm going to call them nuts and bolts of our program. And let me just get to this. So just so you're aware, I said before that 65 congregations have run this past year across the country. Just so you know, every kind of denominational congregation, every size congregation in every part of the country, places that aren't congregations, that are sort of different sort of models of community centers have run it as well. Just if you're from one of those places, we can do any of those things. And I just pulled, literally, we have an enormous amount of data because all of our family sessions have a survey at the end of them that parents fill out. They hand their phone to their teen and their teen then completes the survey. So we have an enormous amount of data that I'll share you like quick pieces from. And these are just 3 quotes. One from an education director, one from a preteen, and one from a parent, just to give you an idea from different parts of the country, just to give you an idea of things that are said. And I want to call your attention to the preteen one actually in particular, although the story about the Hebrew name is really lovely, but the idea of I like how me and my mom communicated about what we think is important. So, right, if I had to say what our program does in one sentence, our program helps parents and teens have conversations that they wouldn't normally get to have. And that is what we're looking to do. We're trying to give the groundwork to start a conversation. You're never going to be able to have them finish it because the conversation never ends. But that is what our program seeks to do. I mentioned the enormous data. I'm not going to read through each one of these, but as you can see that number 664, that means there are 664 people this past year, this is only this year's data, that said these things, who said either they agree or strongly agree to these things. Again, calling your attention is today's session helped me feel like I'm part of a Jewish community that supports me as a parent. I think particularly in the world we're in right now, that is a value proposition that is, I mean, it's always important and near and dear to my particular heart, but I think it is even more important today as we are concerned about what families are going to do in this new environment regarding synagogues and regarding Hebrew school and all of those things. They value feeling like a Jewish community is supporting them, is helping them parent, is doing those kinds of things. And this program is one of the ways that we hope to help you do that as we move into the next school year, quote unquote. We also have preteens who fill out the evaluations. Here are theirs. You'll see the numbers are comically lower, but that's because 20%, because you've all met teenagers, they said, I don't know. They clicked off the I don't know button. 20% of them on every question click off I don't know, which still gets counted in the percentages. So there you have it. All right. So any questions about this before I go into like the program itself? All right, here I go. Our program asks for partners to run a minimum of 2 family sessions and 4 preteen sessions per grade. By per grade, I mean we have 6th grade, we have 7th grade. We have enough material for you to run both grades simultaneously, 2 trains moving along separate tracks. If you are a place where your congregation is smaller and you run 6th and 7th as a combination class, we have that model for you too. No worries at all. We have that model as well. But I'm talking right now like 6th and 7th are separate, but we can push them together. Each family session is right now written or being rewritten as a 1-hour online program for a Zoom platform. They were an hour and a half for in-person, and we actually suggested you make it a 2-hour thing to have some schmooze or food or whatever time with a break. But right now they're being written as a 1-hour program on a Zoom platform. All of our programs, whether in person or online, have a time when parents and preteens are together and a time when they are separated into breakout rooms like we just did. We give you all the instructions, so don't worry about that. But what that does mean is you need 2 facilitators, at least, right? 1 for each room, right? Because you're not gonna have the teens leading their own conversation like we had some of you leading your own conversation. You can handle that, you're grown-ups. Wait, I didn't mean to do that. And each preteen session is also written as a 1-hour program. That's true whether it's online or in person. It's written to fit into the confines of what I would call a regular Hebrew school class. So whenever your regular 6th grade meets or 7th grade meets, that's what it's written to do, whether that's in person or online. We do have some partners who are shifting things to make those more like 45 minutes in the new online environment. There are people I know who are making their classes shorter than that, so that would have to be discussed, but we can work those pieces out. Just to give you an overview, this is just an overview. This is my grid. This is like my thing. This is our sessions. So we have, as you can see, in 6th grade and in 7th grade, each have a column. There are 3 distinctive ones in 6th grade and 3 distinctive family sessions in 7th grade. And then we have a 4th one that can go to either side. or replace either side. Remember I said we ask you to run a minimum of 2 family sessions per grade. Some people run way more than that. People definitely have been running more as we put on more. Some people only run the 2. That's totally fine. How you run them is entirely up to you. Do you want to run all of these in one block? What's the word I'm looking for? In one unit. There's the word. In one unit, right? So you're going to do a family session in October, then run the preteen sessions, then run a family session in November. Yes, you could do that, or you could run a family session in October, another one in January, another one in April. It will depend on your particular schedule and how you're working things. In general, we always say that, let alone for this year. We will have all of our curriculum up on the website at all times. Webified version, right? Written for an online environment, for an in-person environment. We will have both written every single time so that you can, as your particular location, because different places are going to open up at different times, and different, I imagine different ones of you are going to have meetings in person or not. You can choose whichever one works for your community. We want to make this user-friendly to you. All of our sessions have everything you need already in them. It is a button click. At least one person on this call knows that I was the director of education at a synagogue for 13 years. And so it's very important to me to have this be really user-friendly from the other end, because I know all of you and all of the people you work with are really stressed for time, probably even more so right now, and you need this to be as easy as possible. So if in a non-online environment, if you're meeting in person, if there's a handout that needs to happen, we've already made the handout for you. In an online environment, if there's a PowerPoint you need to show something, we've already made the PowerPoint for you. So this is just sort of our general model. Questions, comments, concerns? I've stunned you all. You can feel free to unmute.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is that me?
Yeah.
So I'm the one who knows that Pam Barkley was the educational director, because I had the benefit of working with her for years and years and years, and I missed her terribly. So this has been a lot of fun. So it won't come as a surprise to her, but I have the question. For our 6th graders who are not going to become B-Mitzvah until 8th grade, how do you sort of deal with them that it's 6th and 7th?
So we talk about, we have places who are running this in cohorts, seasons, whatever, who they do it in different ways. And I have personally actually gotten on the phone with partners to help them figure out which way they want to do this. Some want to still run this as 6th graders and 7th graders. You will note the 6th grade sessions are all deeply attached to the actual B'nai Mitzvah. Look at the titles of them, right? B'nai Mitzvah, why am I doing this? I'm going to go to the preteen session. Center of attention, looking good, feeling good. That's about what you're wearing at the event, right? Those are deeply tied to the actual B'nai Mitzvah, whereas the 7th grade titles, we use the lens of B'nai Mitzvah, but they're less tied to it, because in 7th grade, they start to have those B'nai Mitzvahs. And so we want to make sure that they're not aged out and feel like this isn't for them. But making friends and life online and money and gifts, all are things that can use the B'nai Mitzvah lens as much as you want to, but also take it far outside of that. It is not about that in particular. So just from a tracking point of view. So that's one thing. Second, I'll say, is that some people have elected to actually run, depending on the size of the congregation, family sessions more than once as each group becomes, is up for their initial cohort session. So we have places that have run, today I am an adult, 3 different times in a school year as each of their 20 families start the process. That's absolutely a choice. In the Zoom world, that's probably a pretty good choice, because Zooms with 60 families, if you're a congregation that has that size, are pretty unwieldy. So 20 people might be more manageable. And so they may run it more than one time. That's another way of handling it. But I work with each partner if they come up with some sort of cohort related issue to figure out what will work best given the material, because I know what's in every session. Have we had success with congregations who have shared religious schools? What happens if one of the partner schools doesn't want to participate? So have we had a shared religious school, Daniel? I can't think. Nothing springs to mind, but I know of another person considering the same thing, just so you're aware. I have spoken to someone else who's considering that.
The one thing
I would imagine,
go for it.
I would imagine that if the partner shul doesn't want to participate, I mean, you can still run it with your families. It's not like you can't. I don't know if it depends on, like, do you get in trouble for that? I have no idea. But is there a precedent for running things with one group from the religious school as opposed to both, if it's a shared shul? And if there is, run it with the group that you want to run it with. Absolutely.
So we have a really good question from Rabbi Barbara Pensner. Pam, could you say a little bit about how you adapted everything to Zoom? Like what pedagogies you used? Because Pam has done a number of different seminars for the current clergy and educators who are doing the B-Mitzvah program, helping them adapt the program. So could you say a little bit about that process?
Absolutely.
That done to the curriculum?
So just like we've done with you in an hour, we have used the chat, we have used Padlet, right? We used breakout rooms. We were going to use a whiteboard, but we decided to go with breakout rooms, and we did PowerPoint. The same thing is true of all of the sessions. The key, as far as I'm concerned with teens, is to keep things moving and to use different modalities. And so in every session, you're going to find a variety. We are going to use all of the things I mentioned and more. Answer gardens, or a Kahoot, or you name it, there's going to be some other thing in it so that the teens are engaged. They're going to be changing their names to their favorite cereal. They're going to be, not really their favorite cereal, but you could, because that could be fun. That just came to me as I was speaking. Right, you can do what you can. There are ways to make teens part of this. Instead of, we have a lot of barometer activities. So instead of just doing like a thumbs up or thumbs down, we'll have them stand up, and how far away or close are they to the computer is whether they agree or disagree. So we're using physical things. Right? Or if you agree, do this dance move, right? There is a lot of choice in our curriculum right now. So there'll be a facilitator tip that will say, here's a barometer activity. Here are 3 different ways you can do it. And it depends on who's running it. And it depends probably on what you did last week. If you're running these in sequence, right? You're going to want to use a different way than you used last week. But we're going to make sure that you have enough of a variety like you did in this webinar. That's part of why we wanted this webinar to have all those different pieces, to show you that there are ways to keep this moving and keep this going. The breakout sessions for teens and the family sessions are usually about 25 minutes. And then the parents and kids come back together. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, in person or on Zoom, that's the gold. You go on mute and they have a conversation about whatever it was they just did. And that's a guided conversation, obviously, but that's the gold, because you're helping them have a conversation about things they don't get to talk about, particularly in the world we're living in. They're all on screens next to each other in the same room, parents and kids, but not actually talking to one another about important and meaningful topics. And this is a way of getting them to do that.
Yeah, I think it's also just important to note that, we're working, of the 65 communities that we worked with this year, some of those communities have 80 different B'nai Mitzvahs happening in the year, and some of them have 8 or even less. So like, we're really working with very different size institutions and within that, what Pam has done so beautifully is, when Pam knows that there's a small community trying to figure out how to do it, she's also thinking there were these other 3 communities that did it, and we worked with them, and here are the solutions they came up with, and here's what I can help you with. And the same thing is true for the larger communities, when people have had to break things down and thinking, how many people do I need to facilitate a conversation if I have 60 people registered? All of those questions that come up. And we are trying our best to have good best practices for all different size communities. And so it makes it easy for anybody who is, pressed for time and looking to figure out how to make this happen and make it work.
So I'm mindful that we are out of time. So I'm happy to stay on and answer other questions if you have it, but I want to tell you 2 things before you go. 1, you probably already have a survey in your inbox right now about this webinar to find out sort of what you thought, what follow-up you might want. Who else in your congregation do we need to talk to, right? You're 1 person, maybe 2 from a congregation. We know that the B'nai Mitzvah programs happen in teams of people. We want to be in touch with you. Number 2, there are There is training for our B'nai Mitzvah program beyond exactly what we just did. It used to be a one-day in-person training. Instead, it's going to be a Zoom-based 3-hour training. There are dates for that. You're going to get that information by email, so don't worry about it. But there'll be 2 or 3 choices for that, because I know you're in different parts of the country and times and all that fun stuff. But just so you know, we ask teams of educators like yourselves to come to that training, so you all hear the same thing and start on the same foot. That means the clergy and the educator and the classroom teacher who's going to be doing the preteen sessions all at the same time. We feel so strongly about what we do is we have one price, and for a congregation, and as many people as want to come. It's one-stop shopping kind of thing. So that's the other thing I wanted to tell you. Fees are, so our program, because someone asked about it, the cost for the B'nai Mitzvah, the cost does not, for curricular access, does not, of course, cover our entire cost, but we understand what's going on in the world. At the moment, our B'nai Mitzvah program is $360 for the year. If that is, to some people, that sounds like, oh, that's nothing to some.
You're done, everybody. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Connection issues. Hi.
I don't know
Hello,
what just
everybody.
happened.
I hope you had a wonderful weekend.
Anyone? I'm gonna mute. Okay, I just muted everybody, which I don't usually do, but I don't know what that was. That was kind of weird. So $360. Yes, the Jewish number. If that is in the world we're in right now, like way too high a bar, it's not too high a bar. We are working individually. We understand what the world looks like right now, and we will work with you. By we, that is either me or Daniel or your local regional team member. We have members of our Moving Traditions team located in different places around the country who will be in contact with you and work those things out. If you also are going to run our team programs are $600, and both together you get a discount because are $750 to run both. The idea is that we're committed to working with you, and we don't want costs to be a prohibiting factor. So let us know if that becomes it. You'll see in the survey, you can always tell us any piece. There's a blank spot, anything else you think we need to know, tell us that. $360, no, per institution, yes. Not per kid. You charge kids whatever you'd like to charge them. We charge $360 for your institution. You get access to our curriculum for the year. We do updates as things go on. What we ask from you is to tell us what you ran, so we know what you ran, and give us feedback on the curriculum. We are feedback people. We want to know what works. We want to know what doesn't work. And we want you to give our surveys to parents and preteens so they tell us what worked and what didn't work, and because we have to give information back to our funders. It's just a reality. So there you go. So that is my spiel. Again, thank you all for joining. Sorry we went over by a few minutes, but if you still have more questions, still happy to hang around, so I'm not going anywhere. Other than that, have a wonderful week.